It's that time of year again. WNBA Training Camp officially opens in around less than 48 hours. And I've got the one and only Maggie Hendricks here to not only discuss the most competitive W camps across the country, but we're also going to discuss the trickiest WNBA camps to try to predict. And also we're going to discuss what changes are going to happen in this year's WNBA training camps. The Locked On Women's Basketball Podcast. It starts right now.
Ogunbowale for the win.
Good! You are Locked On Women's Basketball. Your daily podcast on women's basketball.
I was dancing.
Hello and welcome. You are locked on to women's basketball. I'm Jackie Powell, one of your Friday hosts. I cover the New York Liberty at The Next. I help with The Next social media strategy. And I've covered women's basketball nationally at many different places, including Bleacher Report, SI, W Slam, and many others. I'd like to thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. And remember that Locked On Women's Basketball is brought to you by everyone at The Next, a place where we cover women's basketball all the time, and we tell the stories that need to be told every day. Also, Locked On Women's Basketball is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and many more. Before we get into it, also, I want to remind you listeners that at The Next, we are having a special sale going on right now. If you subscribe today, you will get 27% off your subscription. So take 27% off what is $9 a month / I believe it is $72 a year. And that 27 is in honor of the 27th WNBA season. So the last time you and I were together, listeners, I had Terry Hortzman, our Minnesota Lynx beat reporter, come on. And we talked all about how we thought Minnesota might have won the 2023 WNBA draft. But what are Maggie and I, Maggie Hendricks here, of Bally Sports, what are she and I going to discuss today? Well, WNBA Training Camp begins oh so soon, less than 2 days away, and we're going to identify some of the most competitive WNBA training camps in segment 1. In segment 2, we're going to talk about the most tricky to predict camps in the league, and we'll make sure we clear up what the distinction is between competitiveness and tricky to predict. And finally, we're going to talk about what's different about WNBA training camp this year. There are some new CBA rules, and also prioritization is starting to take effect. So, all right, Maggie. First of all, thank you so much for joining us. It is an honor and a privilege to have you on here.
So I'm excited.
Yes. So I want to start it with you. What are some of the most competitive camps in the WNBA when training camp opens in less than 2 days?
I think for me, the most competitive, and by this, we talked about this before, by this we mean like, what are the training camps that are just going to have some incredible position battles and players just going at each other? And I think we have to talk about the defending champion Aces, because I don't think you can talk about a camp that has A'ja Wilson and Candace Parker in the same camp and not say that that's going to be crazy competitive, because we know how both of those women are. You know, and when you throw Kelsey Plum in it, when you throw Jackie Young and Chelsea Gray, I mean, that's just going to be like the work that'll be happening at those camps is going to be impressive.
I just wonder. So I'm looking at who is expected to be at their camp. I'm also wondering, do some of those rookies that are now sophomores from last year, so the Kirsten Bells and the Asia Shepherds of the world, there could be a possibility that those two do not make the 2023 Las Vegas Aces.
Yeah, I think that is a real possibility. Because first of all, the Aces have such they have so many big contracts. Even with some players taking a discount, it's still they have huge contracts. And so that I think that means that they're definitely probably only going to carry 11.
Yep.
And there's going to be some questions. Like, did they expect more out of Kirsten Bell last season? Not that bench players get a ton of time. They have a guaranteed contract, Kayla George. So what does that mean for the other players, and even players who like we personally love, like Sydney Colson, does she make the team? It's not, I don't think it's written in stone.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I know it's really interesting because in 2019, Sydney Colson, I think she might have been the last player to make that roster. And then there were, I don't know, she had a stint with Chicago that didn't really go well. There wasn't a ton of time for her to play because she played behind Sloot, and that was the season that Sloot played all the time. Yes, because she did not have really a secondary ball handler on that roster. You had a backup point guard, but those are two different things.
Yeah.
And so it was fascinating to me that the Becky Hammon Aces valued having that cultural stalwart. And to me, that's Sydney Colson.
Absolutely. That's something we learned about during the finals last season. I did a story on the place of Sydney Colson and Teresa Plaisance because the two of them are hilarious together. It's kind of sad that Teresa's over on Seattle now because they're like a comedy team, and it just is so fun. And one of the things that Becky Hammon said about the two of them is like, yes, they make us laugh. They keep practices light. They do all of that, but they also work their butts off. And when it's time to focus on practice, they're practicing, they're working hard, and they're making us better. So like that to me says a lot about who Sydney Colson is. And also remember 2021, Sydney was out of the league. And it was because she played in Athletes Unlimited that the Aces saw her, Becky Hammon saw her play. Because I mean, it was all kismet. They were playing in Vegas that year.
Yep.
And because of all that, that's why Sydney got a chance at last year. And that's why Sydney has a ring. It's going to get a ring now. So, Sydney is an important player, but it's just a really tough roster to make.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be fascinating to see what the Aces value. Do they value trying to develop some of these younger players like a Kirsten Bell or an Asia Shepherd, or I believe, they have that 3rd round draft pick on there as well?
No, she's already been cut.
Oh.
Yeah, they already cut her.
Oh, really? So that was in their miscalculation. I know they waived Elizabeth Balagoon, who...
Oh, that's who I was talking about. That wasn't it?
No, they didn't draft her.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
They did not draft her. I think...
Let me look at their actual roster. I have so many rosters open.
Yes. They have Alexis Peterson, Brittany Davis, Courtney Range.
Brittany Davis was the draft player.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Courtney Range was a undrafted free agent, but yeah, Brittany Davis out of Alabama was the drafted player. So yeah, I mean, they have lots of options, and obviously you're going to go when they have such a tight salary cap crunch. The rookies are the cheapest, so that helps. So then that doesn't bode well for Kirsten Bell and Asia Davis. So,
and Asia Shepherd, yes.
Asia Shepherd, excuse me, yeah.
No, of course, and then I also I think about, well, how much do they value Kia Stokes? I mean, Kia Stokes is one of the least vulnerable, or let me rephrase that. She's one of the least versatile players in the league. She does a couple of things very well, which is why she stayed on the team.
Right.
When you have Kayla George, who the Aces seem to be really high on her, really excited to see what she does.
Yeah.
I mean, then basically Kia Stokes is your third center. Is that sort of what they're going for here? So,
right. And yeah, do they need a third center with Kia Stokes being a vet and at her having vet costs? And that's, I think we have talked about, like we've all talked about often on Twitter, that we're trying to get fans ready. There's going to be players you like. There's going to be players who have won things that are going to get cut. And this is one of those perfect examples. I'm not saying that I know Kia Stokes is going to get cut. I don't know.
Yep.
But I think when you look at the math and you look at what she's done, and like you said, her versatility, I don't think it bodes well for her. That doesn't mean that she's out of the W. There might be another team that sees, especially her size, and says, no, that's what I need. But at the same time, like the math ain't math in there in a great way for Kia.
I mean, she almost was signed by Atlanta, and she has a relationship with Dan Padover. And as we know, the Dream need a little bit more size. So who knows? That could be something that we see down the line.
Totally.
But I think we both agree she's just not as versatile. And the Aces aren't in a situation where they need a backup center. They went out and got one. I mean, they seem very sold on Kayla George. I mean, they gave her a protected contract, which blew my mind. But anyway, I want to transition to another team's training camp that I think is going to be super competitive, and that is the New York Liberty. Yes, I know we have started this podcast talking about the two super teams. That was not by design. It just sort of happened. And so the reason I bring up New York is because when you look at their math, and I do want to make a shout out, Her Hoop Stats, Richard Cohen, released a piece, I believe, on Thursday morning, where he did a lot of the salary cap math to try to predict how many players each team will be able to house throughout the season. Because that is some heavy duty math that you have to do to figure it out.
And I do not like math. So I appreciate when other people do math.
Yes. So according to Richard, most likely the Liberty are going to only be able to, have 11 players on their roster. And so what's really interesting here is you have pretty much 4 players fighting for one spot. And that's why it is so competitive. I mean, so the people who I think are for sure making the roster, obviously the uber talented starting 5 or projected starting 5 of Jonquel Jones, Benijah Laney, Brianna Stewart, Courtney Vandersloot, and Sabrina Ionescu.
It still boggles my mind that this is a team, that this isn't an all-star team. It's been months now, and I'm still like, holy crap. But whatever. Continue. I'm sorry.
It is quite all right. Kayla Thornton, who I've reported, she was targeted in the Jonquel Jones trade. The Liberty were not going to complete that trade without getting someone like her in return. So she will absolutely make the team. Her contract is protected. Stephanie Dolson, another protected contract. Then you also have the Liberty's 2 international bench players that are fan favorites in Han Shu and Maureen Johannes. The thing to know about Maureen Johannes is that she signed her contract. She'll be coming over late. She will come over after her French league season in Lyon ends. She does not apply to prioritization this year, which is wild. But the fact that she didn't play in the Wubble or in 2021 is what helps her out here. So
is that why it is? Okay.
She's a third-year player. And so the rule is it's 0 through your third season in the league.
Okay.
So she will come in, my guess is around like a couple of days after the season starts, or a few, maybe like May 23rd, 24th.
Yeah.
And then she'll leave like a week or so later for Eurobasket. So there will be some roster flexibility when Johannes leaves, but those folks, and there's Jocelyn Willoughby as well, who a lot of people do not believe in Jocelyn Willoughby like I do, in part because she's been hurt for a large majority of her WNBA career. But I see Jocelyn Willoughby akin to what we saw from Jessica Shepard in 2022. Jessica Shepard on the Minnesota Lynx, a player who had like multiple injuries in a row, but was very well respected by the franchise, which I can say Jocelyn Willoughby is very well respected by the Liberty organization. And once she got healthy, she proved to everyone what she could do.
Yeah.
So those are the for sure folks. The people that are fighting out for this final spot, it's Didi Richards, who has been marketing not only the league, but the Liberty a ton.
Right.
Is a fan favorite. You have Epiphany Prince, who is like the Brooklyn native, who is sort of coming back for maybe could be her final season in the league. We're not sure, but she's getting older. You have Sika Kone, who the Liberty drafted in the third round of last year's draft, who, mind you, I was shocked wanted to come over this year. And then you have Niara Sabally, who was the 5th overall pick in also 2022. Yeah. So it's really tough because, and it's just like with the Aces, Maggie, it's like, are the Liberty going to value some development on that roster when it comes to sort of sustaining what they have? Or are they going to value veterans? And are they going to give that final spot to Epiphany Prince?
Well, I think there's a couple things to keep in mind. I think, first of all, I don't think they're going to value development that much because they are a win now team. I mean, just look at the makeup of this team. And even though these players, like these star players, Jonquel Jones, Brianna Stewart, they're not old by any means. They're like, what, in their late 20s? There's still a lot of moving parts in keeping a super team together. Mm-hmm. And so I think the expectation for the Liberty is that they need to win right now. So that means there's not going to be a ton of time for development. But I think there's also a whole lot is going to depend on how Niara Sabally looks at camp. If she comes out and is in great shape and is playing well and is playing the way they expect a fifth overall pick to play, then I don't think there's going to be that much question about it. If Didi Richards, same thing. If they see that Didi Richards has an incredible year, or has an incredible camp, then I think Didi's got a much better chance. Epiphany, it's hard because she's been around so much and she knows she is a veteran, but they also have that already. They have Courtney Vandersloot on the team. They have, a Brianna Stewart. She's won a couple championships. So I don't know if they're going to be like, that's what we need, as much as that they're going to need people who take some load off of those stars.
I for a fact know that the Liberty value versatility. And so my only question with Epiphany Prince is that, she and versatility and playing a role are two very different things. There is some overlap. Like Epiphany Prince was a fabulous role player for the Seattle Storm. But I'm not sure if the Liberty are going to need her to do that same role or if they're going to need someone who can really defend. And so I think the edge there then goes to Didi, who can really defend. Or do they feel like they're going to need some more depth in the post? You have Niara, who can play the 4 or 5, who can also stretch the floor. And then you have Sika Kone, who is a bit of a mystery in that she played so incredibly well overseas, but the competition was not EuroLeague or Euro Cup material.
Right.
And I believe she's 19 years old. So it's, I could go on and wonder about why she chose to come out this year rather than staying another season to develop. What, Echo? I am cat sitting, folks. So if you heard a cat meow, that is Echo. Anyway, before we move on from these tough training camps, Maggie, let's first talk about the LA Sparks, because they are not a super team, but when we look at this training camp roster, you're like, oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great roster of players, and there's just like a lot of moving parts in that they have one player coming back from pregnancy. They have another one who is pregnant right now. They have so many new players, both because of free agency and trades. They have a new coach. They have almost like it's a brand new franchise in LA. And
it is fun, but I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, well, I feel like there are a lot of players that have WNBA experience whose skills overlap. And so that's why I feel like this is going to be really competitive, especially at the point guard position, where you're going to have a battle between Layshia Clarendon and Jordan Canada.
Right.
Which is wild to me.
Yeah. I mean, Jordan Canada showed how well she can play last season. But man, I also wonder, considering how up and down and just turbulent their season was last year, the Sparks season was, how much credence does that lend that Jordan Canada had some great games last season? Obviously I'm not the one looking at it. I'm not the one making these decisions, but like how much do they take all of this into account?
But also, we don't know if Jasmine Thomas is going to be ready to go for camp either.
Yes.
So that's a huge question.
Now, we did see her in Connecticut last season. We did see her she wasn't running by any stretch, but we did see her doing some drills with the band on and the resistance band and doing that. And that was back in September. So we'll see, what that translates to now for Jasmine. The way she was definitely talking when she first got traded was that she does expect that. And considering Curt Miller was her coach in Connecticut and is now her coach in LA, I don't think he would have made a trade for her. He would have pushed for a trade for her if he didn't think she was going to be ready.
That's fair. I mean, she's on a protected contract, so she's for sure making this roster. But I guess I'm just concerned because, you also have Crystal Bradford, who played really well in Athletes Unlimited, and she signed a training camp contract. You have Carly Samuelson with Katie Lou Samuelson pregnant at the moment. You just have a lot of players here. I mean, Rashonda Gray, I could talk your ear off about Rashonda Gray. And she, in my eyes, is the Sydney Colson of whatever team she's on. Not for the comedy piece, but for the culture piece.
Yeah.
When it comes to sort of being that person who can, stabilize a team and really provide support to other players, show younger players an example.
Yeah.
So it's just, there are, and we will discuss this later in the show, but the Sparks are going to be a really complicated team to try to figure out also, just because you have all of these players with professional experience. And then you also have two players that won't, I mean, in addition to Katie Lou Samuelson, Dearica Hamby is still on maternity leave.
Right.
So that leaves room for potentially more players.
Yeah.
And you even have, I'm looking on here, they have the really good, or the point guard, another point guard from China, Yang Liwei.
So they have 4 point guards.
Why? I don't understand.
I don't understand why they have 4 point guards either. But I mean, and when we talk about how there are going to be college players that you really like that get cut, guys, I love Monica Zanano. I love what she brings to a team. She is not tall enough to be the player that she should be. And that's just a damn shame, because how could you not love Monica Zanano after watching Iowa this season? But everybody's bigger, and 6 foot, I believe she's 6'2" or 6'3". Mm-hmm. That just doesn't cut it at this level. They just need somebody. She can't do what she did in the college levels because of the differences in height. If she tries to do that here, Brittany Griner's just going to block that ball out to the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, and you can't assume, well, I seem to remember Kurt Miller talking about how he has developed undersized post players. Like, he brought up Bree Jones when talking about Monica Zanano. How strong is Monica Zanano? Because I think the whole thing with Bree Jones is she is so strong.
Yeah. I mean, I would say Monica Zanano is a very strong player. She was really good at holding her own in the post and not getting pushed around, no matter what team she was playing. So I do think she has a lot of strength and presence in the post. So maybe, you know what, I would be thrilled if I'm proved wrong about this. I would be thrilled. But I also think one of the things about Brianna Jones is that she is much more mobile.
Yep.
She is a very mobile player, and we didn't see that out of Monica Zanano. Again, please prove me wrong. I want this. I loved watching her play in college, and I loved, I really just enjoyed how she handled the spotlight. So if she can continue to do that, fantastic. But I just, it's a different level. There's just no other way to put it. It's a different level, and you need to be taller. You need to be stronger. You need to be faster. You need to be able to learn concepts like that. If she's ready to do for all that, then she'll do great. But it's a lot.
Yes, it is a lot. And coming up, we are going to discuss what are the trickiest to try to figure out when it comes to these training camps. I mean, we sort of started getting into it with LA, but I think that's just going to be, it's going to be very competitive, because you have a lot of people with WNBA experience, and we have a sample size of what they can do. The teams we talk about in the next segment, it's a little bit more unpredictable. But first, I want to remind you all about a car I like to call the Nissan Aria. And so Nissan has its Player of the Week brought to you by the Nissan Aria. And this week's Player of the Week is Brittany Griner. Yes, Brittany Griner was reintroduced to the media on Thursday at what was a fascinating press conference. You couldn't help but feel something during those intense moments of vulnerability, but also at the joy and jovialness from BG herself. I compare BG to the Nissan Aria because when BG is at her best, she is powerful, incredibly fierce. I mean, the performance she put on against the Chicago Sky in the 2021 WNBA Finals was electric. I mean, it absolutely was. That dunk in Game 2, absolutely electric. But also, like the perfect SUV crossover, BG is a two-way player. She does more than just score. The 2023 Nissan Aria packs pin-to-your-seat power and premium intelligence all in one electric vehicle. The all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Aria, the electric vehicle for people who love to drive. Shop now at nissanusa.com. Also, this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. I will never forget when my mental health journey began. I was always very outwardly stressed out all the time, but I didn't really know what that was. And it wasn't until I couldn't pass my road test when I was a senior in high school that I thought that, okay, maybe I need some additional help. Why couldn't I pass when I practiced just as diligently and probably more so than my peers? Like a lot of people, there's a common stigma where you say to yourself, well, what's wrong with me? So first of all, I'm here to tell you that there's nothing wrong with you, and there was nothing wrong with me. I just needed to take care of myself in a new way. Just like when you have a cold, flu, or stomach bug, you can't function at 100%. The same that goes for physical health also goes for mental health. So sure, therapy helped me pass my road test, but it's also helped me understand a lot about myself. It's helped me through grief and understanding what that is. And most importantly, therapy has helped me become a better version of myself. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's online and designed to be convenient and suitable to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. If you want to live a more empowered life and discover even more of your potential, therapy and BetterHelp can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/lockedon. All right, let's get back to the program. Thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. So just to remind you, we are on 6 days a week. And join us for tomorrow's episode on Saturday, where our scouting crew of Hunter Cruz, M. Adler, and Lincoln Schaefer will conduct a 25 and under draft, which will prelude to their WNBA season coverage, examining how the best former prospects / current young players will fare in this upcoming WNBA season. And speaking of former prospects, current young players, the camps that Maggie and I are going to discuss in this segment include a lot of those folks.
Indeed.
So, Maggie, I'm going to give it to you first. Break down a couple of these really tricky camps to try to predict.
So for me, the two toughest are Indiana and Dallas. And that's because they have a lot of young, exciting talent and not a lot of roster spots. And so and they even have second year players who are going into their second year who have done a really great job. And we already saw that Indiana cut Emily Engstler, who was one of those second year players. And I think we're going to see some more. There's going to be a lot of battles between players who have either just graduated or graduated a season ago, because they both have a lot of young talent on their teams.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really, a lot of people were shocked when Indiana announced that they waived Emily Engstler. And
I want to mention something about that.
Yes.
Yes, I was surprised too that Emily was gone. But at the same time, that they cut her now when she has plenty of time to get on with another camp, she has plenty of time to join a new team, I think was actually a much kinder way to do it than when it's closer to rosters being locked. And I honestly, I respect Lynn Dunn in the Fever more for handling that way and just being honest and saying, Emily, we don't see a place with you, so we want to make sure you can find somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we haven't heard a lot about the decision, but also Angsler is coming off a back injury, which shortened her time overseas. So, we're not really sure. I mean, who knows? She could get picked up by another team, or she may need more time to rehabilitate that back or
Yeah.
just make sure that everything's okay there. Now, I think you mentioned Dallas, which, as we know, the Wings, their strategy for many years has been building their rosters through the WNBA draft and having just a smorgasbord of draft picks to choose from. And it's been really interesting in that you then get to the season and a lot of these folks in the draft aren't really given a shot to prove anything.
Right.
And so, I mean, obviously they have a new coach in Latricia Trammell, she is very, very savvy. I mean, she gets a lot of credit for defensively being incredibly smart, but she is someone who is well known around the league to be someone who will do the best with what she is given. When I look at the Wings, it's really tricky because what are the chances that someone who was the 10th overall pick, what are the chances that Abby Myers makes this team? I don't know.
I don't feel like they're great. And that's not a knock on Abby. It's the fact that she's going to have Enrique Ogunbowale and Lou Lopez-Seneschal playing in front of her. It's just tough. And like we have actually seen when she was playing with Maryland that Abby can play defense quite well. But is she going to be playing defense well enough to be a person who will start in front of Lou? I don't know about that, and that's a tough battle right there.
Also, do we know if Lou is healthy and ready to go? I mean, she suffered a knee injury toward the end of the Sweet 16, I believe, and
that entire UConn team, like you want to like stage all of them because of the injuries they dealt with this season. So yeah, that's a tough one.
I think based on how the Wings have been presenting themselves, it seems almost a given that Maddie Siegrist will be making this team.
Yes.
Sort of same with Lou Lopez-Seneschal. And it's just when you look at the players that are battling for spots, and so according, again, to Richard Cohen at her Hoop Stats, they can fit 12, but you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, you have 8 players vying for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You have 8 players vying for maybe 3 spots.
Yeah. I mean, in one of these players is Crystal Dangerfield, who's going to be as a point guard. I mean, Veronica Burton clearly proved herself last year. And since she's a Northwestern one, I always feel, even though I didn't go to Northwestern, I feel ownership over all Chicago athletes of any kind. So I am happy to see Veronica Burton do so well. But yeah, like is Crystal Dangerfield, who was part of that trade that brought Natasha Howard to town, is she a good enough backup that they're going to keep 2 young point guards on there? I mean, and Crystal Dangerfield was a rookie of the year, but it doesn't seem to matter now.
I mean, based on what I know about that trade, apparently Crystal Dangerfield was what sealed the deal for Dallas.
Okay.
They really wanted her. If they didn't include her rights in that trade, it wasn't going to happen. But that's how Dallas felt.
Right.
The idea is you need to have another pass-first defensive point guard. That's Crystal Dangerfield.
Right.
And they also signed her to a 2-year deal
Yeah, that doesn't feel like somebody that they're going to view as expendable. So, okay, so then that's even fewer spots. If we say that Crystal's definitely on, which I kind of lean towards, then how many other spots does that take up? Well, obviously one spot. Good job with math, Maggie. But like that just makes it even tougher. And I think it's going to be up to players like Abby Myers to show that she can be that she can play the point guard too. She's not just a shooting guard. She's got to show some versatility to get that roster spot, or they're not going to keep any single player rookies or single position rookies. They're going to want to see versatility.
Oh, for sure. It's
like we said, tricky. It's tricky.
I mean, we could spend a whole show on the Dallas Wings.
We really could. There were a lot of draft moves that I was surprised by, but then also that I was like, oh, that's a great one. So it's tough to figure out exactly what they're aiming for. Like when you look at the Indiana Fever, who we're going to talk about in a second, they love defense. Lynn Dunn loves defense. And LD. So she, we know that about Lynn Dunn, and you could see that in the players that she picked. She loves her from some defensive players. But,
she's a 3-and-D team.
Yeah.
She likes people who shoot threes too.
Yes. It's kind of amazing that she's never grabbed a Mabry, but whatever. At the same, so what their thoughts are. Dallas, it was like they want every shooter that's ever shot the ball, and like, great, but okay, so what does that mean? How are all of these shooters going to pass the ball around? How is Enrique going to get the ball and then get the ball to other people? Like, how are these things happening? So it's going to be interesting to watch. It's going to be interesting to see, and I'm going to have fun writing about them on Bally Sports.
Oh, yes. There's going to be a lot to write about when it comes to the Dallas Wings. Now, with, you talked about the Indiana Fever, who, the past 2 years, they've had really solid drafts. And so now you have a team like the Minnesota Lynx, who I believe had a really, really nice draft.
They really did.
In 2023. And so why I think they're so tricky is because while Cheryl Reeve has been a little bit more open about the fact that the Minnesota Lynx are in a new era, they're in I'm going to say the scary word, Maggie. Rebuild mode. They're in rebuild mode. I just wonder, does that translate to also the players that they keep? Does that mean that the Lynx are favoring a Dorka Juhas, a Bree Beal over, players that they trust in Rachel Banham and Damiris Dantas?
Yeah. This is going to be a tricky one because first of all, I think Cheryl Reeve being like, it's a rebuild. This is a rebuild. We're doing a rebuild is a fake out. I think Cheryl Reeve isn't somebody who's going to be like, no, we're not competing for the title. Like, that's just not her. So I think there's a little bit of play with it. Not necessarily that she's like, oh, this team's going to win the title this year. But I think when she makes her team think that the expectations aren't high, that she is saying, like, because we're underdogs, we should have a chip on our shoulder. I think that's what she might be doing, which is brilliant. And it's why she's she has like 800 million rings and is possibly the best coach ever in W history.
And maybe in women's basketball.
Maybe in women's basketball history. She's definitely up there. So I kind of take any of her rebuild talk with like a shaker of salt because
okay. I'd have to look up the transcript. I don't think she I don't think she used the word rebuild. I don't think she used it.
But everything she was saying, I think that was more about sending a message to her players to say, I expect more, or we are going to be rebuilding. And we are now underdogs, so now we're going to play with it. Because for a long time, you could never call the Minnesota Lynx underdogs, no matter what. No matter the injuries, whatever, they were still the Minnesota Lynx that won 1 million titles this century. So, like, I think that there was a little bit of that, a little bit of like, if we need to rebuild, we will, to like light a fire under her longtime veterans, like players we were just talking about, like Damiris Dantas and Rachel Bannum, but also to say, hey, we're going to get some new players and get excited about them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I'm just thinking, I'm like, if it comes down to, so, okay, the for sure people to make the roster here. Bridget Carlton, she's on a protected deal. Nafisa Collier, Kayla McBride, Diamond Miller, she's your second overall pick. I mean,
yeah.
Tiffany Mitchell's on a protected contract. Ariel Powers, protected contract. Jessica Shepard, who I mentioned earlier, is very well respected. And then you have Natalie Achonwa, who has a protected contract, and she gave birth. Yes,
has she given birth? Has she?
Or
I'm
maybe
not 100%.
Yeah,
I'm not 100%. But yes, I think. But I don't think we're expecting to see her necessarily this season. I think it'll depend on how she's feeling, how coming back is like. There's so many different factors that go back into if a new mom can come back very quickly. So obviously, we know with Nafisa last year, it was because she wanted to play with Sil. It wasn't like because of the way her contract was or anything like that.
So you've got around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or you've got around 8 locks, and you have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, you have 12 people to fit in 4 spots?
Yeah. That's a tough one. And I think that question of like, does development matter more or does winning now more matter? I think that's when we're going to be pushing towards the side of development. Because as they say, you can't teach height. And Dorka Juhas has a whole lot of that. Bree Beal has shown that she is a great defensive player who can shoot, Holly Rowe, but she is a great defensive player. You know, she's the number 2 scorer in Illinois high school history behind one Miss Candace Parker. I was so mad when Holly was like, oh, you'll learn to shoot. She can score.
So I was at the draft, so I did not hear a lot of what went on in the broadcast. I more caught up on Twitter to see what in the world went on.
Oh, I just got very randomly angry right now. But anyway, Bree Beal is, I feel like I would want to hold on to Bree Beal because maybe she won't be great this year, but she will be great soon. And we have seen that South Carolina players can make that transition to the W very well. They're starting to get to like that UConn level of just how good they are at transitioning to the W. And so I think that's going to be in Bree Beal's favor. And like I said about Dorka, you can't teach height. She's 6'5". She's strong. She's fast. She might not be right now ready, but I wouldn't want to be the GM who let her go.
I also think the thing about Dorka is that she can play many roles. She can impact a game in many different ways. And Cheryl Reeve really likes using her bigs as passers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the role she had for Natalie Achonwa was doing just that. A role that we sort of haven't seen come to fruition, but someone who can shoot a mid-range 2, she can shoot a 3-2, and she just has a really great eye for the game. I mean, I will never forget, before AZ Fudd got injured this past season, seeing how quickly Dorka and AZ Fudd created sort of this chemistry, and that Dorka knew exactly where her guard was going to be.
Yeah.
That's the type of post that Cheryl Reeve gets in her camp. And
yeah, I mean, and that just having that along with somebody like Diamond Miller and what Diamond Miller can bring to it. Diamond Miller, I'm not even going to play around with my very favorite player, one of my very favorite players to watch in college basketball this season because of just how fast and aggressive she is. And I'm just, if I'm a college coach, I'm going nuts over her. And apparently, from what I hear, the someone from the Lynx staff was at basically every Maryland game this year, and they played all over the country, and it didn't matter. So obviously they're very excited about Diamond Miller, and I think there's going to be some building to build up Diamond Miller.
Absolutely. I mean, you do not. I really think the idea here is that they are building around Nafisa Collier and Diamond Miller. That's sort of where we're going here. Before we take another break, Maggie, I want to turn it over to you to talk about the Chicago Sky because I do not really know at all what to expect from their training camp.
I have been covering them since 2019. I do not know what to expect. So this is going to be a really interesting training camp. And obviously, they made big trades. We're going to see Marina Mabry on the team. We're going to see Courtney Williams, Isabel Harrison, Elizabeth Williams. So, like, that stuff I'm excited about. But, like, I'm also excited to see how Courtney Williams and Kalia Copper play off each other. If that's going to be fire or, like, I don't know. But it's going to be great. I can't wait. But James Wade has shown that if a player really impresses him in camp, they will make the team. We saw that last season with Rebecca. So when you put all of these things together, I believe they either have 18 or 20 players in camp. They're going to have to push hard if any of these players want to all make it. But like, there's a lot of international players. There's a lot of players who you don't necessarily know from college, but that doesn't mean that they can't make a difference. So I can't even do a breakdown of like, will this one make it or this one, because it's just kind of it's so up in the air. It's so like, there's nothing clear cut about this camp except for like Kalia Copper being really good.
Well, also, I think we have to bring up Alana Smith because that was one of the most shocking contracts. What is it with these Australian players getting these shocking contracts? Alana Smith and
they just must have there must be a great Australian agent. I get completely hypnotized by Australian accents. So maybe somebody in the Sky's front office is like me. Maybe it's a Chicago thing.
I don't know, but my understanding of Alana Smith is she doesn't sign a contract way above the vet minimum to not make the team. So that I think I would say is more for sure on this roster. Who I'm going to be really curious about is Annalay Maley.
Right.
I think she gave such an incredible showing in preseason last year.
And she really did. I honestly, she was one that I thought might sneak her way onto the roster. So we'll see. The only problem with her being a small forward is that in front of her is Rebecca Gardner and Kalia Copper. So like, that's a tough thing. But if she can show some versatility, if she can show she can play well, doing other things than just being a small forward. Who knows? So that's like the Sky. It's a lot of like, I don't really know where this is going to go. And that's fun and probably terrifying for the women trying to make the team.
I just don't know what to expect out of people like Robin Parks and Kiana Traylor and Angel Baker and Morgan Birch.
And could Christina Nikwe finally make her spot? Can she find the spot that where she sticks, where she has found a home. Now, losing Azurá Stevens, the Sky needs some height.
Yeah.
And Christine's a big girl. So, I mean, that's a possibility, but there's just so much in the air right now that we don't know, and that these next 3 weeks of camp are going to tell us.
I mean, I didn't really watch a lot of these people in college either. It's like we can, with people on the Lynx, like Dorka Juhas, Bree Beal, and Taylor Soule. I mean, we watched them.
We saw them, yeah. They were all at least in March Madness, yeah. But yeah, a lot of the other ones, I think James Wade likes to go outside the box for a lot of his draft picks. And part of that is because he spends half the year in France. So he sees a lot more international players than Lynn Dunn does, than Cheryl Reeve does. So when you look at it that way, then I see why he goes more for the international than the collegiate players. But, we'll see how that all works out.
We will see. Now, before we jump into our final segment, I want to talk to y'all about eBay Motors for a championship team. That could be one of the WNBA super teams, or maybe not. It's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. I mean, that's what we've been talking about this entire show, right? Which players will make rosters? Which players have the best fit with a certain franchise? Anyway, don't mind the slight digression. It's the same fit when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know if the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right. So our closing segment is not going to be necessarily about specific teams, but more about WNBA league changes that we're sort of seeing come into effect during this training camp. And so, Maggie, I think where I want to start here is there was a change in the CBA during this offseason. And basically, what it allows, and I'm getting this again from this great piece that Richard Cohen at Her Hoop Stats did on roster breakdowns. Basically, what is going to happen this year is that WNBA teams are allowed a replacement player for when a player or two, in the case of the LA Sparks, is either pregnant or on maternity leave. And so what happens, and instead of dealing with the hardship carousel, which was messy and has been messy for years, teams are guaranteed to have a player in that person's place. But the catch is it has to be a player that fits under the cap and that is signed to whatever league minimum they fall into. So basically, how also this will happen is that teams will have to submit a legal roster by that standard deadline before the season starts. But then after they submit that, and on like the first day of the season, they can retain that replacement on the applicable minimum salary. So that's helpful,
yeah,
I think, for teams. But also, so Maggie, what questions do you think this new thing raises?
Well, I mean, the real beauty of it is that women who are in their 20s and early 30s, which is, of course, the time when it's easiest to have babies, can have babies. Like they're just like, makes my heart so warm that these players aren't freaking out about it the way, like we've seen in interviews about Cheryl Swoops that she was like, oh crap, like I'm having my dream come true, but is that a happy thing now? So we know that is over. So like, I feel like there needs to be some tweaking of that, because if they are going to find a good replacement player who isn't going to want to go overseas, they're going to need to pay them a little bit more than the minimum. So there should be like, there's probably going to need to be some kind of tweaking of that situation. Not to mention that the hard salary cap is just an issue. It's just an issue. And so not having any sort of relief for that pregnancy still puts these teams in a bind, because this hard salary cap is not nearly big enough, which is why we see teams carry 11 players. And so when you throw all of that in together, there needs to be some tweaking. But I think my biggest question is like, how do you figure out exactly who is a great replacement player? And is she going to want to stick around when she knows that her spot is not here for good, especially with Eurobasket going on, and there's always somewhere to play that will pay you in this world. So all of these things together it's still going to be messy. It's just not going to be so difficult for the players.
Yeah. And I think with this type of situation, there's more of a pathway to use the players that have learned your system in camp. Under the hardship system, if you were in the middle of the season, like, you're asking people to stay in shape, you're asking people to come right off the street who don't know your system. It's really interesting, because to me, this is sort of like, I don't want to say this is like roster expansion, but it's sort of like it's like a tiny excuse for it, if that makes sense. And it's an unbalanced excuse for it. Because there are only, there are 4 teams that will be using these exemptions. And that's in the Minnesota Lynx for Natalia Chanwa, the Phoenix Mercury for Skylar Diggins-Smith.
And LA with Katie Samuelson and Dearica Hamby. So yeah, so it's just 3.
Oh yes, 3. My bad. But the point is, I mean, that's not just one team. That's 3 teams.
That's a quarter of the league. A quarter of the league is dealing with this. And quite frankly, I think that I am not going to try to get into these women's head and talk about like pregnancy planning or anything like that. Mm-hmm. Well, I do think that when they saw that Nafisa Collier and Cheyenne Parker were able to come back and were able to play well and all of that, I think that, and that they got their full salary and all of the things, all of the benefits that they've been promised, then I think more women are like, oh yeah, maybe I can have a baby and be fine. So I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see more and more players take this and take advantage of their maternity benefits.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when we talk about, there was this incredible or just really eye-opening piece from Bloomberg this week, where it was talking about what the goals of the 2020 CBA were. And it very much so was getting the maternity benefits and salary for players on maternity leave in place. Those were some of the main bargaining points. And now years later, we realize that that hard salary cap, that is definitely one among many things that will be on the table in the next CBA. But I think it's just, and the reason I bring up the pregnancy replacement contracts also is because with a team like LA, potentially they might be carrying a roster with 14 players.
Right. Which
is sort of wild.
It's almost like the 40-man roster in baseball. Like you have to be able, if you call somebody up, he has to be from the 40-man roster, unless there are certain specifications and all kinds of things that apply. But so it's almost like that you have a situation where you do have extra players, but like, I am sure Katie Lou Samuelson, even once she gives birth, is going to be paying attention to what the team is doing, especially since her sister's on it. You know, like you still will be focused, like learning about all of these things so that when she does come back, you know, so it's a really interesting wrinkle. It's one that coaches and GMs are going to have to figure out how to manage it, and how they communicate with their players and all of that. And I do think in this situation, Cheryl Reeve, you know, we've talked about her a lot as like a good GM as far as picking players and things like that. But I think there's also a big part of it that her learning to navigate all of this, she was the first one to really have to do it with Nafisa. So now we're going to see, like, did she set the standard, you know?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think the final note I want to touch on is prioritization. And we're really seeing that take effect this season, just because we're seeing these training camps that have 21 players. And we're like, well, a lot of these players are going to be on time. And that's because obviously with Eurobasket and with, I believe, EuroLeague and the Turkish League making some adjustments, we're going to see some players in training camp that we're not used to seeing. And so I have a quick stat to read aloud. So based on sort of this, I guess, prediction that there might be 143 players in the league at one time, and that's because of the maternity replacement contracts. So 11 out of 143 potential players are players who are going to be late this season, potentially 11 or 12. That's around like 7 or 8%. That seems like a pretty dramatic number from what we knew it was.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you looked at previous seasons that players weren't making it until June, you know, like there was all kinds of situations like that. So I think, you know, we're going to see players have to make choices. And like Emma Miesemann has talked a lot about how prioritization is a problem for her, because we don't know if we're going to see Emma play in the W again, because she's Belgian. She doesn't want to spend all of her time in the United States. I don't blame her. But like, how is she going to balance all of that? In prioritization, it might make it impossible, which makes me sad because I love Emma. But yeah.
I mean, she won EuroLeague MVP, and then she won the MVP in the Turkish League.
Right.
Well.
And she won the finals MVP in 2019 when the Mystics won it. So Emma's a special player who is just kind of falling through the cracks because prioritization makes it tough on the European players.
And Gabby Williams is another one as well. But
right.
Maggie, I feel like you and I could talk about this training camp for maybe another hour. But
we probably could. But I think, first of all, Sully, my dog, misses me. So I can't go forever.
So because of Sully, I'd like to thank you all for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. I want to give a special and huge thank you to Maggie for joining us on the show. Please follow her at Maggie Hendricks on Twitter. Remember to join us for tomorrow's episode. Yes, we are on 6 days a week, and our scouting trio of Hunter, M, and Lincoln will conduct a 25 and under draft, which will serve as sort of like an introduction to their WNBA season coverage, where they're going to be tracking the youngest players in the league. This has been Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm Jackie Powell alongside Maggie Hendricks. We hope you have a wonderful weekend and happy WNBA training camp to all.
Ogunbowale for the win.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.